It's been another incredibly busy week here at the People's House. Let's roll through everything President Trump did for you, the American people. The Department of Homeland Security repurposed the CBP One app into the CBP Home app for illegal immigrants to self-deport. The number of illegal immigrant gotaways has plummeted to a daily average of just 77. Egg prices dropped this week, and the Department of Agriculture unveiled a strategy to curb egg prices even further. Inflation fell in February to its lowest point in just under 4 years. Some Maha moms, myself included, got together at the White House to discuss the first Maha Commission meeting and how we are going to make our food and our country healthy again. The Department of Education initiated a 50% reduction of force as we continue to make our government more efficient. And several more companies like Merck, GE Aerospace, and Asahi Beer announced massive investments in the United States of America. We are building back our country.
I love Asahi Beer. Nice dry. Get that in Osaka. Good morning. Can you hear me now? Welcome to the Wake Up America Show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. We're live. I always feel tardy, but I show up everywhere early. Zed the Head. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Wake Up America Show. Click the like button, even if you didn't like what happened there. Sorry, Rumble Studio giving us some problems this morning. Yeah, what did I do for this show for like 5 minutes thinking it was live? Rumble Studio hadn't pushed it. It wasn't me. This was not me. Glad you're here anyway. We have a lot to discuss. Donald Trump bombs the Houthis. Here's how Fox News put it. Trump wins golf championship a day after ordering strikes on Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen. Sorry, what? Trump said the win is likely his last. Win against the Houthis, or did he win the golf tournament? I guess we're going to have to stick around and figure that out. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's approval ratings matched for the highest he's ever had, but there's a catch. It's not all hearts and roses. We'll talk about the approval ratings this morning. Well, what do we have here? Austin Peterson interviews the former head of the China branch of the Voice of America. Remember, Donald Trump appointed Kari Lake to take over the Voice of America. She had big plans for it, and it's gone. Donald Trump announced he would close it. And I mean, how good was the timing of that interview? I think the news that it would be closed by President Trump came on the same day, like Thursday. I interviewed Sasha Gong here in the morning in the Wake Up America show. You guys remember, right? And then I think later that day, Donald Trump announced he was going to close the Voice of America after we had spent all day trashing it. He must be a listener to the Wake Up America show. He was watching that Sasha Gong interview here and saying, yes, I should shut that down. So I've got that for you. I'll play a little clip from my interview from Thursday with Sasha Gong. Just a couple of minutes to that so that you guys can see how ahead of the curve you are if you watch the Wake Up America show, but you already know, so click the like button. But if today's your first time watching the Wake Up America show and you're saying, ooh, I want to be a part of a show that's talking about the news a day before it happens, well, then click the follow button as well. Be a regular guest. Mondays through Fridays, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. It's a 5-day-a-week live show. It's fun, it's funny, it's entertaining, it's exciting. We've got great guests, great interviews. You'll stay informed, you'll stay up to date. You'll join a community of like-minded fellow patriots like yourself just by clicking the follow button and dropping a chat in the comments section saying hello to good people like Ike Giving a Shits, Sign of Jonah, that's John Bordenaro, Drew Van Runkle, Robbie Thurman, Dad Bod Baboon, Joni Rankin, Zed the Head, Amy J. Ease, take it easy, baby, Cecilia H., as well as my lovely Stephanie Peterson, who's here with Kermode Bear, QFA, Mongoose 87, Bruce Burtwhistle, Quest Fanning, Grizz Cheese. The crew's all here. Welcome to the Wake Up America show. We're glad to have you here and thankful. We're going to talk about Donald Trump bombing the Iranian-backed militia, the Houthis in Yemen. We're going to talk about that as well as the Voice of America story. I've got a billion clips for you today to talk about. But first off, real quick, we've got two guests, of course. Second hour, John Miltimore here to talk about a Supreme Court case that might end diversity, equity, and inclusion for good. That's going to be 8 a.m. Central. We'll talk to John Miltimore about that. At 8:30 a.m. Central Time here on the Wake Up America show, we've got a great guest for you. His name is Austin Padgett, another Austin, great guy. And he's going to talk to us this morning about the attempt by the new right to sort of retcon Hitler. I don't know if you've heard many of the conversations that have been going on online. If you follow X, then I'm sorry for you. If you don't follow X, you're probably very lucky. But I'll clue you into like how the online banter on the right is to go back and to essentially say, well, Hitler didn't want to let everybody know what they were going to do with the Jews. So it was kind of like, oh, well, you take the Jews and you say this, what you want to say to the Jews. And then Hitler was actually trying to bring Goebbels back a little bit. And he thought Goebbels was going a little bit too far. And it's kind of like, what you talking about, Willis? What's going on here? What are you trying to convince me of? And I hear Tucker Carlson saying things like, maybe the wrong guys won World War II. And I'm kind of like, that doesn't sound very America first, because I'm pretty sure we were on the opposite side of that war. They attacked us first. Does anybody remember? Pearl Harbor happened, and then Hitler declared war on the United States. People are like, Austin, read Pat Buchanan's Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War. I read it, and I profoundly disagree. I just think that, if a country declares war on you, they're probably your enemy. I don't know. Maybe you know what it is, Austin. You drank the Kool-Aid too much in the public schools. I actually paid attention in the public schools, and that way I could suss out what was right from wrong. Austin Padgett will talk to us about that this morning at 8:30 a.m. Central Time. It's the socialism part of the National Socialism. Nationalism not necessarily inherently bad, right? Maybe a little collectivist, but the socialism part, I think we should all say, hell no, we won't go. Not go quietly into that good night. What's with the love for socialism? You can frig off with that. We're going to talk about the Wake Up. We're going to talk about all these topics and more on the Wake Up America show. Let's talk about the things, though, that people are really interested in. The last time, let's see, this is an NBC poll in November. Just 27% of Americans said the country was headed in the right direction. Now that number is up at 44%. Okay, take a listen.
First of all, the mood of the country. This really jumped out. We asked folks, is it on the right direction or the wrong direction? That 44%, you say right direction, that's up since November. And if that doesn't seem like a lot, the last time it cracked 40%, you got to go back to 2012. The last time it actually hit 44 or higher, January of 2004. So a lot of this is Republicans, but independents, that number is also up since the election on the direction of the country. First of all, the mood of the country. This really jumped out. We asked folks, is it on the right direction or the wrong direction? That 44%, you say right direction, that's up since November. And if that doesn't seem like a lot, the last time it cracked 40%, you got to go back to 2012. The last time it actually hit 44 or higher, January of 2004. So a lot of this is Republicans, but independents, that number is also up since the election on the direction of the country.
Well, congratulations, Mr. Trump. President Trump. So Trump ties for the highest approval he's ever had as more Americans say that the United States is on the right track than any time in 20 years. So 3 months into his second set, President Trump hit the highest approval rating he's ever had as commander-in-chief, while more Americans are saying the country's on the right track than at any point since 2004. How about you? Do you guys think that the country is on the right track? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment down in the chat. Right track, wrong track? Let's hear your thoughts. So the bad news is it's not all, hearts and flowers for Trump here. The bad news is that Trump has still not won over a majority of Americans, right? And 54% of Americans said that they disapprove of his handling of the economy. So that's the first time he's actually lost a majority on that issue in the NBC poll. So even so, the surveys found that voters generally feel like Trump is bringing the right kind of change on the key issues, even tariffs. More Americans support his changes to trade policy. 41% then oppose them. That's 38%, according to NBC. See, look at me reporting the news that I don't even like. It's the news is the news. Oh, if you guys are wondering what those like shiny burn marks that look on my arm right there, those are poison ivy. FYI. So everybody like, why is Austin's arm greasy and look messed up? I did some yard work last week and I got into that poison ivy. Boom! But it doesn't burn and it's like crazy, man. So here I am reporting on news that doesn't necessarily go along with my narrative, right? You're going to be informed on the Wake Up America show. Even if I don't like it, you accept what the truth is, right? That's what I say. So more Americans do support his changes to trade policy than oppose them. Thank God we're not a democracy, right, guys? Remember, we love to say that whenever the democracy goes against what we like to believe. That's despite the stock market sell-off last week, though, as Wall Street grappled with Trump's decision earlier this month to slap 25% across-the-board tariffs on Canada and Mexico, as well as a 20% tariff on China. On many other key issues, voters felt the same way, with Trump's actions on the border being the most popular. 56% of the American people said it was a positive change. They're in favor. On government cuts, 47% of people said his changes were good, compared to just 29% who opposed. Even on his handling of the Ukraine war and NATO, policies on which he's received significant pushback, more respondents said that his actions were good. 41% then opposed his actions, 40%. Still statistically insignificant difference between the two of those there, of course. NBC poll respondents also appear to be cutting Trump some slack on inflation. 40% said his policies are having a positive effect, compared to 30% who said they were having a negative impact, and 28% who said Trump's policies are not changing things at all. Probably the wise centrists. Dadbod Baboon says that I like the shakeup. The same old was getting us nowhere and was full of corruption. Completely agree. What do you think? You can drop a comment in the chat. Maybe you're not listening or watching us on Rumble, even though you should be. But if you're not and you want to communicate with me, I can only really see comments from Rumblers, and that's really where I pay attention anyway. It's not to say anything bad about anybody on any of the other social networks. I'm glad to have you here. But I can only monitor so many screens at one time. I'm monitoring 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 screens, and 1, 2, 3, 4 keyboards and 2 mice. It's crazy over here. So I can only monitor so much. And the soundboard. There you go. So if you're enjoying the shakeup, you can send us a text, 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. If you're joining us at Rumble, I can see your comments, but if you want to talk to me, and maybe you're listening to us on the iTunes podcast later or on Spotify, which is great, and you want to contact us, that's great. 573-319-1586. Grizz Cheese says, happy birthday, Steffi. That was on Saturday. His wife had her birthday on Friday, and how fun is this? Mine is 4/13. His wife was 3/14. So, hey, happy birthday to Grizz Cheese's wife and your upcoming birthday. We had a wonderful weekend here in Missouri. Took my wife to some cool things that she wanted to see and did some shopping for. We had an absolute blast. You can't count to 10 without doing the count laugh, AP. Very good idea. So join us over on Rumble if you're not with us. That's Mondays through Fridays live, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. The Wake Up America show streams live. And I do check those text messages at any time during the day, so you can text me anytime during the day that you like at 573-319-1586. So president sort of remains a political Rorschach test amongst this deeply divided country. Trump's approval rating among Republicans is 90%, while his figures among Democrats clock in at a paltry 4%, according to poll. Imagine being the 4% of Democrats who are like, yeah, Trump's doing a good job. I mean, You know, my bet is that the approval ratings among Democrats is higher than 4%, but they know that if they dare say something nice about Trump, say that the country's headed in the right direction, it can't be just 4% of Democrats. They're not all brain dead, right? The fact that there's signs of life, if they were all brain dead, we'd hit 0%. But 4% of Democrats are approving of the direction that Donald Trump is taking in this country. Now, that's got to be a lie, because the Democrats, some of them were polled and are like, I just, I know that they're probably listening to these phone calls. There's still Democrats who work at the NSA. The deep state hasn't been dismantled. If Donald Trump, when Donald Trump exits, when Donald Trump exits the national stage here in a few years, the Democrats might take back over power, so they're probably going to punish me if I have these thoughts. But there are probably more than 4% of Democrats who think that the country's headed in the right direction, right, despite the economic melees that we may be entering in the phase that we're going to push through. But I wonder what your thoughts are on this at 573-319-1586. A very merry birthday for Houthis and Houthis. So some 47% of voters that were in this survey approve of Trump compared to 51% who disapprove. So this is the all-time high in the poll. So he previously had hit 47% in early 2020, just before the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is, relevant because the country was on the right track before we got hit with COVID-19. Things were going well. The economy was humming. I mean, Trump wasn't blaring out tariff headlines every other day and scaring the shit out of people, and their, retirement funds weren't being decimated on a daily basis. So people, there wasn't the kind of fear, uncertainty, and doubt then that we have a little bit now. And now we're back to, at least in terms of approval, we're back to where we were. Now, again, remember, we are in the honeymoon period. So, these headlines may be different 3 months, 6 months from now. Typically, a new president sworn in has about 6 months, get his agenda passed, get his items across, as many items as he can across the finish line before they become a real lame duck and there is no chance of getting your agenda across the finish line. But I mean, Trump's use of executive orders, essentially, and now what, bypassing a judge who says that Trump can't deport some of these violent criminals from the United States and bring them to jails in El Salvador. A judge stepped in and says, Trump, you can't do that. And Trump continued to do it anyway. I mean, I saw people posting the Andrew Jackson quote, "Let them enforce it." Yes. So this is a good one. So Worcester versus Georgia, where Andrew Jackson was reported to have said, let's see, enforce it, in a popular quotation that is believed to be apocryphal. I'm forgetting what the word apocryphal means at the moment. President Andrew Jackson reportedly responded, "John Marshall has made his decision. Now let him enforce it." This quotation first appeared 20 years after Jackson's death in a newspaper publisher Horace Greeley's 1865 account of the Civil War, the American conflict. So it's possible he said it. It's possible he's not. But it sounds like the kind of thing that... Andrew Jackson would say. Andrew Jackson would say, "John Marshall, the judge, has made his decision. Now let him enforce it." I mean, it is. There's going to be so many quotes attributed to. Think about all the fake quotes that are going to get attributed to Donald Trump after his presidency. I can't stop laughing at this headline I'm reading over at foxnews.com this morning. I was doing a little bit of brushing up on the Houthi conflict, so I thought to myself, okay, well, let me go find some good sources for this story, and maybe I can share a little bit of insight with my listeners. Means it can't be verified. Thank you, Sumner, appreciate it. Apocryphal. Apocrypha. That's an epic sounding word. Trump wins golf championship a day after ordering strikes on Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen. Trump said the win is likely his last. Okay, wait. Hold on. Wait a minute. So Trump wins golf championship Okay. A day after ordering strikes on Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen. Okay, so here's what... This is the headline. I'm just sharing with you the news. Trump wins golf championship a day after ordering strikes on Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen. And the subheading is, Trump said the win is likely his last. Okay, well, I'm guessing that means that he won the golf championship, not that he won the conflict with the Houthis in Yemen. But one has to wonder, why would you pair a story about winning a golf tournament with bombing of to protect international trade routes, which, by the way, I am told by many people that these international trade routes are what the globalists use to take our jobs here in the United States. So why are we bombing Yemen to protect international trade routes that turk our gerbs here in the United States? They turk our gerbs. Did the Houthis take our jobs? You know what it is that the Russia-Ukraine war is about to end. So as Thomas Massey had said, is that the reason we're bombing the Yemeni-backed, the Iranian-backed Yemeni-based Houthi militias is because deep state and the bureaucracy and the military-industrial complex are terrified that if the Ukraine-Russia war is over, and Trump is supposed to meet with Putin tomorrow, and it's widely believed that they might actually come to a peace terms or agreement tomorrow, possibly. We hope, right? Certainly would be a wonderful thing. But Thomas Massey is out there, and his conspiracy theory is that the reason why we're now getting involved in attacking these Yemenis is because now the military-industrial complex needs a new war, right? And the neocons who are out there who've been, at least the ones who have been sort of hiding on the edges or like really attacking Thomas Massey, and many of the libertarians who are kind of like, why are we doing these bombings in Yemen? It certainly is an interesting question on the foreign policy side. For me, it just doesn't make any sense. Of course, the alt-right and the Groypers and many others are out there saying it's a war for Israel. No, it's the Zionism, not the Israeli nationalists. They want to build an Israeli nation and stuff. Oh, did you know that Israel is a Zog, a Zionist-operated government, Zionist control the Israeli government? I'll take you back to the news, get away from that Groyper shit. It was a big day on the green for President Donald Trump, reports Fox News. Trump announced in a Truth Social post on Sunday that he won a golf tournament at his club in Palm Beach, Florida, noting that it would likely be his last. Well, that's sad. I just won the golf club championship, probably my last, at Trump International Golf Club in Palm Beach County, Florida. Such a great honor. The awards dinner is tonight at the club, the post read. Okay. I want to thank the wonderful golf staff and all the many fantastic golfers that participated in the event. Such fun. Now, notice that in Trump's Truth Social statement there, nowhere is there a mention of the bombing Houthis. And yet, if I submitted a story like this, by the way, to any of the outfits that I publish for regularly, Amp America or Human Events, I would think that they would let me go. And I would think that was totally legitimate. And yet, here's how a Fox News reporter puts it. I want to thank the wonderful golf staff, says Trump, and all the many fantastic golfers and that participated in the event. Such fun. Trump's big day on the golf course came a day after the White House shared photos of the president dressed in golf attire as he watched strikes on Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen. Oh, okay, I get it. So he was wearing golf attire. So this is how we make this story work. The White House wrote on X, President Trump is taking actions against the Houthis to defend U.S. shipping assets and deter terrorist threats. For too long, American economic and national threats have been under assault by the Houthis. Not under this presidency. According to the U.S. Central Command, it initiated a series of operations consisting of precision strikes against Iran-backed Houthi targets across Yemen to defend American interests, deter enemies, and restore freedom of navigation. In other words, the United States Navy doing what the United States Navy does, which is protect U.S. merchant shipping. Now, the top 5 nations that benefit, of the top 5 nations that benefit from trade through that strait, are not the United States. The top 5 nations that benefit from the trade, top 5, the United States is not listed among them. China, I think, is actually the country that benefits the most from that shipping lane. And also, why are we trying to protect international shipping? Remember, the international shipping is what is causing the job loss here in the United States, right? They're taking our jobs. Right? Somebody just make it make sense, man. It's just the headline. You know, I read the headlines and they say Donald Trump won a golf tournament day after he backed Houthi, strikes on Houthi militants. It doesn't make any sense. I guess it's not supposed to. It's 2025. Dad Bod Baboon asking the real questions over here. Did they win? Did they let Trump win, or is he really that good? Great question. That's what I was thinking. He said probably it'll be his last one, so we can all, I guess, safely assume that the president won it legitimately, but he can feel that it is fading, that he's in his final days as a golf tiger, and that he probably can't win anymore. But like they say, he's got one last good one in him. We're gonna get back to that story maybe a little bit later. I have the clip. Okay, you guys remember the heady days of March 16th, not March 16th, like the 13th, perhaps, I'm guessing, last Thursday, when we had the former head of the China branch of Voice of America News on our show, and then later that day, we announced that the Voice of America would be shuttered. I mean, you just can't get better up-to-the-minute political coverage than the Wake Up America show. Sasha, you highlighted in your article an anti-Trump bias in the Voice of America's newsroom, especially on coverage of issues like illegal immigration. How do you think that this politicization has impacted the Voice of America's credibility domestically and internationally?
Very bad. Very bad. And what I heard is the China branch, at least I saw the numbers in the past year, the audience went down by 70%. But they covered it up by buying some bots and something like that. But I have evidence. Anyway, so, well, after, 2016, when Trump won, that was the Voice of America director was an Obama appointee. And her name is Amanda Bennett. She's the wife of Don Graham, the owner of Washington Post. So Washington Post, we all know how much deal at that time Washington Post had with China. They, every Sunday they have a China observance something within the Washington Post paid by the Chinese government. That's one thing. And after Don Graham sold Washington Post to Jeff Bezos, he launched a business. He launched business in China. He launched business in China to recruit foreign Chinese students and prepare them for American schools. Partnership with many Chinese Communist Party schools to make, I don't know how much money. That's a multi-billion dollar. So no wonder. You see, if you have such conflict of interest, you should not handle Voice of America. But
I think. And just a few hours after that interview with the former head of the China branch of Voice of America, Donald Trump dismantled it. Love it. This headline makes me laugh. Trump tapped Kari Lake to run the Voice of America, then he dismantled it. Now, Kari Lake had big plans to transform the outlet into a powerful weapon to fight an information war, but instead the president has essentially shut it down. So, no information war for you, Kari Lake. Now, during Donald Trump's first term, he accused Voice of America of speaking for America's adversaries, not its citizens, and completely agree. That's why I brought Sasha Gong onto my show last week to talk about how Voice of America actually actively colluded with China and communist regimes to run pro-communist China propaganda, and then cracked down on people like Sasha Gong, who were trying to get out more pro-American ideas and views around the world. Donald Trump knew what was happening back in his first administration. Late on Friday, Trump issued an executive order that directed the Voice of America. Okay, so it was the next day. So I was a full day ahead of the news, by the way. That directed the Voice of America and an array of federal offices to be eliminated to the maximum extent consistent with applicable law. About 1,000 journalists were placed on indefinite leave. Oh, God, I love it. Those who showed up to work to broadcast their programs were locked out of the building. Jesus, this is amazing. It's going to be it's so healthy for my industry. It's so healthy. I mean, this wasn't exactly what Kari Lake was planning, right? The one-time candidate for U.S. Senate and the Arizona governor candidate. Trump had tapped to lead the Voice of America, and she, of course, was very eagerly seeking roles in the incoming Trump administration. She was confirmed to lead the organization and said she was going to transform the outlet into a powerful weapon to fight an information war. Not going to work here no more. But the rapid pace of events, of course, shows that Trump's campaign to dismantle the federal bureaucracy and control U.S.-backed news content across the globe just essentially said, hey, let's gut the Voice of America, forcing it to go dark, potentially for the first time since it launched during World War II. And it also kind of shows the uncertainty that a lot of these people that are tapped to lead these administrations face, and the tension between their ambitions to be relevant and his own desire to cut those agencies out of existence. Think Linda McMahon and the Department of Education, right? Trump is really wanting to go in and clean house. But I could see how it would be confusing to say on one hand, oh, well, let's abolish the Department of Education, but also let's use the Department of Education to go after woke critical race theory in schools. So it puts you at a bit of a dual mandate that are conflicting. Think Federal Reserve in that sense. But I think the instincts to shut it down and the language that Trump is using in these executive orders. If this is Will Scharf, you're my boy, Will. But the executive order says that the VOA and an array of federal offices have to be eliminated to the maximum extent consistent with applicable law. In other words, that what Trump is doing in these executive orders is saying to the maximum amount allowed by law, and that there should protect him from judicial oversight or interference in what he's doing, because he is trying to operate within the bounds of the law, within his proper purview, which I think is interesting. It's a question of constitutional authority. And of course, every federal judge who was appointed by Joe Biden in the last 4 years is going to get a chance, champing at the bit, to take on Donald Trump, and they're definitely doing so. We're going to speak, though, this morning to John Miltimore about that when he joins us here in about 12 to 15 minutes about that. And we're going to talk to him also about a new Supreme Court case that might kill DEI for good. So some good news. So, Voice of America to be shut down. I wonder what your thoughts are on this. You can send us a text at 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586. The text lines are open. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Speaking of the Department of Education, how does Randi Weingarten, the head of the teachers unions, what does she have to say about that?
And when they cut half the people, it's like evisceration by 1,000 cuts. Yeah. So you want to do this? Have the fight with us in Congress. Let's make sure we get the issues out there. I'm so mad. I'm spitting mad about this because it's hurting the people who can't vote. Children don't vote. Let's not take away their opportunity. And when
yeah, I know you want children to vote, though, Randy. Let's not pretend. Speaking of spitting, Spitfire over in the chat. First time I've seen him here. Let's have all welcome Spitfire to the Wake Up America show. He says it's so delicious watching all the fake journalists, activists are now all gone. Amen, my brother. Amen. You love to see it. You can be in touch with the show anytime, by the way, Spitfire. You can text us at 573-319-1586. The text lines, again, are open. If you'd ever like to be in touch with me or Steffi over here on the Wake Up America show, send us a text at 573-319-1586. Again, 573-319-1586. Secretary of State Rubio weighing in on the controversy surrounding the detention of Columbia student Mahmoud Khalil.
Is there any evidence of a link to terrorism, or is it just his point of view?
Yeah, they take over. I mean, you should watch the news. These guys take over entire buildings. They vandalize colleges.
Intensely.
They shut down.
Rubio telling the news anchor lady she should watch the news. Why is Marco Rubio making me like him? Stop making me like you, Marco Rubio. I've disliked you for years.
Asking about the specific justification for the revocation of his visa. Was there any evidence or material support for terrorism?
Was the negotiator negotiating on behalf of people that took over a campus, that vandalized buildings? Negotiating over what? That's a crime in and of itself, that they're involved in being the negotiator, the spokesperson, this, that, the other. We don't want it. We don't need these people in our country. We never should have allowed them in the first place. If he had told us, I'm going over there, and I'm going over there to become the spokesperson and one of the leaders of a movement that's going to turn one of your allegedly elite colleges upside down, people can't even go to school, library buildings being vandalized, we never would have let him in. We never would have let him in to begin with. And now that he's doing it and he's here, he's going to leave, and so are others, and we're going to keep doing it.
Okay, there you go. That's Margaret Brennan. I don't really care, Margaret. I don't really care, Margaret. If you go to forlibertyshop.com and you typed in a phrase like, I don't really care, Margaret, watch me on the screen here. I don't really care, Margaret. If you type in I don't really care, Margaret, you'll find our I don't really care, Margaret JD Vance shirt at forlibertyshop.com. Now's a good time for a plug. Have you visited forlibertyshop.com? Can you? Will you please bless me with something?
Can you bless me with something?
Oh gosh.
Oh gosh. Money wise.
Please, can you hit? What? Welcome to the Wake Up America show, where it's not just a show. It's a whole network, and we got our own merch shop. I don't really care, Margaret JD Vance shirts. Check them out at forlibertyshop.com, featuring our vintage JD Vance smoking a pipe, looking very 1950s, looking very good and very nice. At forlibertyshop.com, you can get amazing Gulf of America merchandise as well. Check out some of our reviews from what our customers are saying about our items. The Gadsden snake ties, Calvin, the coolest president, children's book, appeal to heaven flag. This appeal to heaven is accurate enough to make AOC pee her pants, says Tiffany Perkins. Here's Gil Johnson's reviews. Anthony Bueno, Cecilia Harden writing reviews. Terry Smith, they love the coffee. Great coffee, delicious coffee. Cecilia Harden loves the coffee. Donna Kroger loves the coffee and her custom sign. Great shirts. Javier Malay merch, sports bras, metal signs, custom metal signs, and read all the hilarious and awesome reviews from the 298 people that reviewed our merch over at forlibertyshop.com. That's the number for libertyshop.com. Visit them now. Margaret Brennan. I don't really care, Margaret, but we'll listen anyway.
There were more executive orders from the president this week targeting some of the country's most prominent law firms, including Paul Weiss. He wants to restrict business activities of the firm, despite a federal judge ruling in a different case that it's unconstitutional. The president suspended security clearances at the firm. He stripped clearances from lawyers over at Covington and Burling as well, because they were involved in representing former special counsel Jack Smith. Do you support this?
Yeah, I think all of these things. I think Jack Smith was politically motivated. I think the Russian hoax, a lot of people should have gone to jail and they didn't. I think the idea that President Trump was an agent of Russia was manufactured. The Steele dossier was based on lies and falsehoods coming from a source that said he never meant it to be used in the fashion it was used. I think Jack Smith's effort to prosecute President Trump for January 6th was politically motivated, and people who engage in trying to destroy President Trump. I don't mind him going after them in a lawful way. I don't mind
Is this lawful?
You know, when Biden
Is this good for the U.S. legal system,
Yeah, I think so.
Senator? Because the president's trying to use government power to punish private business because he didn't like some of the work they had been doing.
Private business aided government power in a fashion to destroy Donald Trump's life. You know, on our side, nobody in your world gets it, but our people believe that the Justice Department was used as a weapon to destroy Trump's campaign and his business interests and to ruin his family, that they made up bogus charges and they proceeded in a fashion that was designed to destroy him politically and personally. I believe that. And
don't you make me say nice things about Lindsey Graham, Face the Nation. Only the mainstream media, the lamestream media, could possibly make Lindsey Graham look good. We got over 200 people watching us live. Yes. Franken Beans says AP's merch is the best. It is the best, the absolute best. Make sure you're shopping at 4libertyshop.com. That's the number 4, libertyshop.com. Thank God I don't have this Washington Examiner piece pulled up here on the screen because it's got like titties, some sexy ad, I guess. Well, if there was any question if I was straight, I guess my search results. Supreme Court case that will kill DEI. Austin, shut up. The Supreme Court case that will kill DEI. John Miltimore. John Miltimore is going to be joining us live in a little bit less than 5 minutes. John Miltimore is the man. He's going to be talking to us a little bit about a Supreme Court case that might end diversity, equity, and inclusion for good. I'll also ask John what he thinks about these judges who are stepping in and trying to make decisions to stop. I mean, basically, I think the Babylon Bee headline really nailed it when it said that a federal judge appointed themselves president of the United States, taking away the president's ability to do the president's job. We'll talk a little bit about the courts. You can't go away because we've got so much more fun to go. You want to go to 4Liberty Shop? Oh, excuse me, wrong goodbye music. This is just the temporary goodbye music. Go to a brief little commercial break. While you're on commercial break, guys, stand up, stretch, crack your knuckles. Go to 4libertyshop.com, buy a box of coffee, and we'll be right back on the Wake Up America show on the 4 Liberty Network. Tired of spending your hard-earned money on woke corporations that don't share your pro-freedom values? Fed up with sipping liberal lattes and progressive cappuccinos? Introducing Founding Flavors from AP for Liberty Shop. Get your day started with Washington's Revolutionary Roast. As robust and principled as the man himself, this blend is the shot of energy heard round the world. Or maybe you want to taste the fervor of freedom with Adams's Patriotic Perk. It's as dynamic and balanced as the U.S. Constitution, sure to awaken your spirit of liberty. For the aficionados, we've got the Jeffersonian Java, a complex mix of flavors that speaks volumes about your refined tastes. And don't forget Betsy's Liberty Lullaby, our decaf option, crafted with the same care and dedication Betsy Ross put into our Star-Spangled Banner. This blend lets you enjoy the taste of freedom anytime without losing sleep. No woke beans here, folks. Just pure, patriotic, pro-freedom flavors brewed with love for liberty. So why compromise your principles for a cup of coffee? Stand up for your values, perk up your patriotism, and start your day the American way. Get your founding flavors at apforlibertyshop.com.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a liberal.
So I think we got to have tough conditions. Tell people to come out of the shadows. If they've committed a crime, deport them. No questions asked. They're gone. If they've been working and are law-abiding, we should say, here are the conditions for you staying. You have to pay a stiff fine because you came here illegally. You have to pay back taxes, and you have to try to learn English, and you have to wait in line.
Racist! Racist! Racist, racist, racist. Good morning. Rise in freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show. That was Hillary Clinton saying, you have to go back. Man, if she had gotten a tan, I would have been full-blown orange Mussolini here. Welcome to the way. She was already wearing the orange jacket. Welcome to the Wake Up America show. We're having a blast today with all of our friends hanging out live, like Sign of Jonah, Robbie Thurman, Dad Bod Baboon. They join us live because they love us. Do you love us? Practice self-love. Click the like button. And how about a follow? If today's your first time watching the Wake Up America show, like Miss Spitfire 7, and boy, she is a Spitfire. She joined us live for the first time today. She dropped a comment. She clicked the follow button. I misgendered her. I realized I was wrong. It's not a Mr. Spitfire. It's a Miss Spitfire, perhaps even a Mrs. Spitfire. But if she's a miss, get her, boys. It's a great place to meet. It's the Wake Up America show. We have a blast talking about the news, hanging out with our friends 5 days a week. On Mondays, it's a special day. We call it Mondays with Miltimore, when John Miltimore joins us live for his 256th appearance on the Wake Up America show. It feels like it, doesn't it? Good morning, John.
Hey, it kind of does feel like that. I'd be curious to see what that actual number is.
Glad to have you here. The Supreme Court case that will kill diversity, equity, and inclusion. John, this is a case that you say is looking like a slam dunk, but not many people are talking about it. Fill us in.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I was listening to oral arguments, this is at the end of February. It reminded me of being an undergrad when you'd hear about these constitutional law course I took, and you'd hear about all these pivotal cases in U.S. history. And this one is Ames versus Ohio, and it's technically Ames versus Ohio of Department of Youth Services. But remember that name because it's going to be a big one. And it involves this woman from Ohio named Marlene Ames. And she had worked at the Department of Youth Services in Ohio for about 15 years until 2019. She had a great record, was getting promoted, and suddenly she got a new boss. And the boss, in year one, gave her all high marks, but she ended up encouraging Marlene Ames not to, apply for a job, which Ames thought was strange. And she applied anyway, didn't get the job. A few months later, she actually got demoted, and her salary was reduced by about half. And they encouraged her to retire. And what was interesting to Ames is in both cases she lost the promotion to a gay man, and then the person that she was replaced with was a gay man, and her boss was gay. And Ames deduced from this, she said, I think I was discriminated against. So she took her case to court. And what's interesting is her case bounced around for about 5 years. And if you read the opinions, these courts were sympathetic to what happened to her. And at different times they said if she had been a gay woman, her case had met the threshold to go to trial. But there was a different standard for people in majority groups. And her case kept getting, in legal terms, it's the prima facie part of the case where you have to meet sort of this minimum threshold. It kept getting killed right away, and court would rule summary judgment for the defendant, but she kept appealing. And eventually the Supreme Court said, no, well, let's take a look at this. And if you listen to oral arguments, it's very clear both the left and the right wings of the court agree that you can't have different standards. You can't have one standard for so-called minority groups and a different standard for majority groups. And it was very clear, like the justices, again, Sotomayor, Alina Kagan, like they were grilling the counsel for the state and were clearly unhappy, saying like this doesn't make any sense. And even outlets like CNN, it's very clear Marlene Ames is going to, I won't say win the case, because what they're going to do is they're going to punt it back to lower courts, and then they're going to hear her discrimination case. But what this is going to do is all these, you're not going to have two different standards anymore. If Austin Peterson has a job and you feel you're discriminated against, you don't have to go have this other standard where you have an abundance of evidence that shows that company is that rare company that might discriminate against a majority group, a white male or a heterosexual person. And that is going to open the door for people to, if they feel they're discriminated against, they can now get legal recourse much easier. And it's going to take a wrecking ball to the whole DEI apparatus, which is really about, it's built on this idea that discrimination is okay depending on who it goes against, right? Like if you listen to Ibram Kendi, he makes it very, he says, if it's discrimination that brings about equity, it's good. If it's discrimination that makes us less equal, it's racist. And there's a quote where he describes that, but DEI is built on that thinking. The court is saying, no. We're not going to have different standards based on your preferred status. So the implications are going to be profound, and we won't get that until June. But like I said, if anybody's curious in the legal cases, go listen to the oral arguments or go read the transcripts. And it's clear that the court, I'd be surprised if this is not a 9-0 ruling.
Why are you gay?
The article suggests that the Supreme Court might rule in favor of her, which would remove the higher burden of proof for majority group plaintiffs. So white, straight Christian males, right? So how do you see this kind of shaping the landscape for discrimination lawsuits moving forward? You really think that this could be like an earthquake in terms of undermining DEI? You seem pretty optimistic.
If you looked at, it's not just me saying this. There's been some, press coverage of this. But what's interesting is everybody's concerned that it's going to open the door to reverse discrimination lawsuits. And I think a lot of people, Americans for years, have been saying, well, that's discrimination. Like, like you can't do that. But when it comes to workplace discrimination, you could do it, and companies did do it, if it was to a majority class, which meant, like, again, if you're maybe a white Christian male, or in the case of Marlene Ames, I think the court was smart in the case they took up. You could see the justices like Kagan and Sotomayor, they were irritated by this. You had a woman, who worked her entire career, was clearly, made great progress in 15 years, and suddenly she's being shown the door. And it's pretty clear, again, these are things that have to come out. I think it's abundantly clear, in my opinion, that it was because she was a straight woman and because she was heterosexual. And the court saying, what's interesting is even the solicitor of Ohio refused to say we should have separate standards for separate groups. He was arguing the case along, a different way, but he says at one point, the standard doesn't work. And I think that's really like part of the American ideal, right? Like everybody is treated equally before the law. And if you go back, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act is what for years people would say, hey, I'm being discriminated against. But it was only being allowed because of a later Supreme Court ruling is if you were part of a minority group. So that meant you could discriminate against people in a majority group, like a straight woman like Marlene Ames, or maybe a white guy like me, and those people wouldn't have recourse. Like if I tried to sue, I'd hit a brick wall. Well, now the Supreme Court's taking that wall down. That means everybody in the workplace that has been discriminated against, now you can't. Doesn't mean everyone who's discriminated against will sue or will win or any of those things, but it means you will be able to take your case to court. And what's interesting, I don't know about you, Austin, I have friends that work in corporate America, and they know, like especially the last 5 years, I think maybe this had been happening for a little bit, for years, but the last 5 years it became obvious. Like this was a spot. No, we're only going to hire a person of color here, or we need to get someone diverse here. And HR departments were very clear. And my buddy had said, he was told, no, we need to get a diverse person. Well, that you won't be able to do anymore. At least you'll be able to do it, but you'll be facing great risk.
Now, my theory on this is, and I'm sorry to take it in this very sexist direction, my theory on this, John, is that the only reason people care about this case is because it was a woman. It was a white woman, right? So you're shrugging your shoulders, but if this was a white man, there would be no sympathy. I don't expect much to change for guys like you, John. I at least have an out in the secular world that we live in. I can just say, oh, well, I'm not religious, and they'll think that I'm a liberal, even though I'm not. But you're a white, straight Christian male, John. There'll be no reprieve for you. You really think that the Supreme Court, even if this is rules enforced, that they'll actually go out and I'll make a deal. I'll make a bet with you. I'll bet you that every white, straight Christian woman will be protected and perfectly fine. And then we'll hear from a lot of white, straight, conservative Christian men who are going to make excuses for the fact that the courts aren't going to protect your kind, John. Not to be too cynical. Not to be too cynical.
Maybe you have a point, but here's what I'll say. What's going to happen after this Supreme Court case is you're going to have employment law firms that are going to be sending out notes to clients. And what they're going to say is, look, you need to be careful now. And it's not just about, minority groups like if you're gay or transsexual or of color or women. Their note is going to explain you can't now be showing overt favoritism. You have to be mindful that you're not discriminating against anyone, right? And again, I'll say, like, that doesn't mean discrimination won't happen. I think it will happen, and it won't happen just against white guys like me. People will discriminate just because that's people. But what it means is now you'll have legal recourse if you feel. Now you'll still have to. There'll still be a high burden. You'll have to be able to show people, look, I was discriminated against, and you'll have to have evidence. But what I think will be the case is even people like me. Now I'm not going to be playing by a different standard. Now I'm going to have the same standard as everyone else, and that means that companies are going to have to be careful.
Mm-hmm. I'm speaking to John Miltimore this morning on the Wake Up America show. Talk a little bit about the possible end of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion standards, because of a Supreme Court case involving a woman named Marlene Ames. She claims she was discriminated against for being heterosexual. If you want to weigh in on this story, you can do so. Send me a text at 573-319-1586. Again, the text lines are open. I'd love to hear from you at 573-319-1586. If you have a question for John Miltimore, send it in. And if I can hear it and see it before the end of the interview, then we will certainly do so. I will certainly pose it to him. The piece mentions both conservative and liberal justices questioning the fairness of different legal standards for majority and minority groups. Does the bipartisan skepticism kind of surprise you? And what do you think that signals about the future of Title VII enforcement?
Yeah, it did surprise me. I thought you might, especially someone like Sotomayor, and she was kind of dissecting the case maybe for some reasons different than Gorsuch, but it was encouraging to me. Okay, so much I get we're divided politically in this country, but even that the Supreme Court is so divided across ideological lines on some issues, it's disappointing. But to see like the justices just grilling the solicitor, I was really encouraged by that. And I do think it means that Marlene Ames is going to get justice. Her case is going to get kicked down to a lower court. And these courts have already signaled, like I said, like they said the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals explicitly said, or maybe it was the Federal Court of Ohio, one of those two, said she had already met the standard if she had been a gay woman. But because there was this separate standard, they said, look, we have no choice but to do this. And now the court's going to say, no, we can't have separate standards for minority groups and majority groups. That runs counter to the whole point of the Civil Rights Act. And again, Title VII, for the last 40, 50 years, people would go and sue under Title VII. But if you were part of a majority group, you were just going to get nowhere. And now, if you have evidence you're discriminated against, you're going to be able to go to court, and you're going to be able to seek restitution. So to me, this is very exciting. Wait and see what the courts, the wording. They did indicate they're going to have a narrow ruling on this, but I don't care if it's a narrow ruling or a wide one. It's going to have the same implication, I think, and that we're going to have people playing on when you file a discrimination lawsuit, you're going to be playing on a much more even playing field.
John, more than likely, the Supreme Court will do what it always does, which is find some way to kind of split the baby, right? Which is to say, to make a partial ruling. Do you think it's possible that, I guess I won't call it apartheid necessarily, do you think that the Supreme Court is much more likely to kind of do what I was saying earlier, jokingly, but to seriously like carve out some kind of protection for like white females, and then, they'll say we're not ruling on white Christian males or something like that, because that's kind of what SCOTUS does. They never will completely overturn some precedent. It's always half measures for them. What could that even look like?
You're right that the high court has its own politics, and we see that. I think there will be some of that. I think what you even though I think you'll have 9-0 on part of this, you'll probably have dissent opinions, several of them written, and you'll have certain justices trying to maybe carve out certain space. I don't think the majority opinion will do that. I think the majority opinion will be narrow, and they're going to say you can't have separate standards for minority and majority groups. And I think that will be enough to really bring down this larger barrier. You'll find, this will evolve, and you might, even once that barrier's down, you might have, juries and other things that make it a little harder for majority groups to win their discrimination cases, but at least they'll be heard. And I think that's, that was the problem with Marlene Ames, even though again, you could see that the courts in their opinions were saying, look, it looks like she was discriminated against. But, we can't get past the prima facie stage here because, of this Supreme Court ruling from, I forget the year. And the high court's like, no, we're not good. We're going to make that clear. Take it back. And now you're going to be able to hear her case. And that gray area is no longer gray. And so I think, we will see people, you're going to see white guys now suing for discrimination and winning.
Good.
And
they should, John. Now, here's I'm going to play a clip from you. This is from Joe Rogan. Elon Musk shared this on his timeline, talking about the question of the ethnic makeup of a country. Take a listen to this clip.
A thing when an all-white country wants to stay all-white, where people get very nervous of. If you have, let's say China. Like, China is Chinese people. We all agree that it's filled primarily with Chinese people. Yeah. There's people that live there from all walks of life, all over the world, but it's mostly Chinese people. If China had decided that they wanted to remain Chinese and stay Chinese, and that being Chinese is very important to what China is, no one would have a problem with that.
Yeah.
When a country like Poland does it, you're like, oh, those white people, they want to keep everybody out. They want it to be all white.
Yeah, and
because we're, that's post-World War II. That's post-Aryan race talk. That's post-Nazi stuff. That's what people are legitimately freaked out about. That's the most recent stain in our history where we look back and say, wow, that was close. Evil.
If China says they want to have a Han majority and stay a Han majority and not have the Uyghur minority become the majority in China, yeah, nobody would have a problem with that necessarily. I don't know, some people would, but in the United States, if we wanted to have white, straight, Christian, male majority, guys like yourself, John, instead of being discriminated against, people have a problem with it. Your take?
Yeah, no, I think for China that might make more sense. I think if you look at the United States, our history is different. It goes back to the idea of e pluribus unum, and of many one. And we have this very diverse American culture. You had all these different people from different religions, different countries. I think that's part of what America is and who we are, and I think it can be a strength.
Is America a Christian nation in your mind, John?
I don't think so. Like I think there were Judeo-Christian men wrote the Constitution, right? Like we know that, but I don't think this country was ever designed to be strictly for Christian men. And I think there were you can find we know about Native Americans, Black Americans, Jewish Americans, all these people. When you go back, we're part of the American culture as well.
John Adams said our Constitution was made only for immoral and religious people. And you are a Christian, so I would assume that to be a moral person would be to be of your religious ilk. So John Adams says our Constitution made only for moral and religious people. How could we be moral if we're not of your religion?
Well, a lot of people are very fond of that quote. Like I think of some discussions that come up, and I think there's some truth in that. When you're talking about the idea of self-government, it means self-governance as well, in that we need to govern our own behavior. And I think religion can help people do that. I think you have a moral foundation there, but Adams doesn't say a purely Christian people. And I'm not somebody that goes and argues you can't be a moral person without religion. Like I don't believe that. I know a lot of moral people that are atheists. And now my fear is, I think atheism is also a pathway to Marxism, and Marxism is a pathway to atheism and materialism, and I think those can be destructive ideologies. But no, I don't like an America that starts to say if you don't practice religion, you can't be here, or if you don't look this way, you can't be here. I know that's not the America that the founders created, and not one I would want to try to create today.
Materialism, a tendency to consider material possessions and physical comfort as more important than spiritual values. The doctrine that nothing exists except matter and its movements and modifications. So that's what I believe. I guess, do you see like Randians, perhaps more objectivists like myself, as just something more of an anomaly?
Yeah, it's funny. I've talked to the Randians about this, and I said they really don't like being called materialists. Like their back comes up. But my point has been for a number of years now that you have left-wing materialists who are the Marxists, and you have right-wing materialists who are Randians. And I like many Randians. I like a lot of Rand's ideas. But if you scrape away a lot of the things, Randianism is materialism. And it is, like if you ask, the idea of a soul to a Randian, some will say, you'll hear different things. Some will say, no, I believe in the soul, but it's really a different conception of the soul than I would answer, or what Plato would have said, or these things. But I think those are two strains of materialism, but that doesn't mean a materialist is going to be left wing. It doesn't mean it's going to be right wing. But materialism, I think, is a philosophy I reject. I think, and we kind of, a lot of us reject it on principle, even if you're not a religious person, this idea that we just want to, whether it was hoard wealth, or it can lead just to a very shallow existence, if you ask me. But that's a bigger topic for another day.
Okay, bigger topics. We're going to have bigger topics because we're going to be talking about Hitler in the next one. I got Austin.
There you go. That'll get that audience here.
Yeah, we got Whitey White over there in the chat already. I'm sure he's really excited for the retconning of Hitler. I don't know if you saw the Martyr Maid gentleman who went on Joe Rogan recently and was talking about the Hitler stuff, where it's kind of like, oh, Hitler was kind of trying to pull Goebbels back. He was saying all this crazy anti-Jew stuff, and I was just kind of like, wow, this is interesting. It's like, it reminds me a little.
I saw clips of that, yeah. And the problem is, whenever you get Hitler, like it's gonna go off the rails, right? You can make valid points. I should say you can't make valid points about beyond Hitler bad, right? There's no room for nuance.
Right.
If you try to get nuance, you're going to get taken, you're going to get sound clipped, and they're going to say you're a Nazi and all these things. I'll avoid going there. I will say the historical portrait of Hitler, yes, he was an evil man, but it's a very shallow portrait. It's a very shallow understanding of the man. And he was evil, he was bad, but he's also been caricaturized by a lot of authors in the West, and there was more there than they want you to realize. Hitler was brilliant. Like he was evil, but he was brilliant.
Yeah, in some ways. He was a terrible painter, though, so...
I don't think he was much of an architect either.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true. Hey, John, where can people read more of your work online?
Hey, you can check out all our content at aier.org or thedailyeconomy.org, where I edit. But check out my stuff as well on Substack, The Take by John Miltimore.
The Take by John Miltimore on Substack. Give it a read. Appreciate you, John.
Hey, great being with you, AP. Have a great week.
You too.
That's how it was. Like, people didn't believe back then, or a lot of people, the capitalists didn't believe back then that you had a right to strike. Today, we're like, yeah, if you don't want to go to work, you don't have to go to work. And if you all do it together, that's a strike. Like, of course people can do. That's not how they thought about it back then. They thought they thought of a strike as like a form of sabotage. And so the authorities would be brought in, mercenaries would be brought in to like deal with these people. And you're talking about, like, people think of like socialists today or something, when like right-wing people, I really try to get this across to them that like today you think like a left-wing socialist or whatever, and you think like a blue-haired college student who's screeching to you about this, that, or the other. Back then, you're talking about guys who, and women too, actually, in certain cases, but guys who spent 12 to 14 hours a day turning a wrench or swinging a hammer. And then after that, then they go to their meetings, and they get home to their family and they sleep for 4 or 5 hours that, in a basement 2-room apartment that's got mold growing on the walls, and they have a bowl of cabbage soup with their 4 kids that live in this horrible place. And then they go back and do it again the next day. These were like working people who were, I firmly believe, if it was not for their sacrifices, we would all still be working under those kind of conditions. Like the capitalist class, and I'm not trying to sound like some kind of a, Marxist or something. I'm just, that's what they were. Like, they were not going to compromise with the people unless they were forced to. And those people, they went out on the picket lines. They fought, they died, In fact, if you go up to a little bit later in the early 1900s, probably the thing labor unions are most famous for these days is like the corruption, the mob involvement, and so forth, labor racketeering. And that kind of got started in the early part of the 1900s. But the interesting thing about it is the way it started was, the owners of the businesses, they were hiring like real thugs.
Interesting. That's martyr-made Daryl Cooper, who has been making waves recently for some of the discussions, not only about Adolf Hitler, but talking a little bit about workers' conditions.
That's how it was. Like, people didn't believe back then, or a lot of people.
We've been having these kinds of conversations here in the United States. Let's go to a quick little break, guys. I'm going to go get my next guest. First time on the show. His name's Austin Padgett. I've actually been hoping to talk to him for months. We just haven't been able to make it out. He's the host of History 102, a libertarian writer. He got published at the Mises Institute. We'll talk to him about that and old Adolf when we get back on the Wake Up America show on the For Liberty Network.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama! a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government. Get off my back.
You know, it's not like Hitler was going and giving big speeches at City Square in Berlin, going on and on and on about how we're going to kill the Jews. And the German people said, right on, like, let's go do it. That was like the speeches that are out there where he is talking about the Jewish question, like almost all of those are like internal Nazi party, like rally speeches, you know, they're not him. He had to be careful about that. Like in 1938, which is pretty far down the line when Kristallnacht happened. It was kind of a nationwide pogrom against the Jews in Germany that was launched primarily by Goebbels, the propaganda minister. But there was outrage in the German cities. People in Berlin, a lot of the places were outraged by what was going on. And Hitler had to actually get on the phone with Goebbels and say, cut this shit out. Like, this is not good. Like, not because he loves the Jews all of a sudden, obviously, but because this is bad propaganda. People are...
So what are you trying to say? Okay. Good morning. Rise and freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show on the For Liberty Network. Click that like button, and thanks to Sina Jonah for that $100 Rumble rant. Wow. Okay. You want to debate? We'll debate. I'll talk to John Miltimore and see what he has to say. But if we do a debate, it will be sanctioned. It will be moderated. It's not just going to be we're screaming at each other. We're going to do something so that we can all learn and enjoy it. It can be relevant to everyone in the question of whether or not we're a Christian nation. But we're moving away from that, talking about Hitler, the ultimate Christian. No, just kidding. Or am I? Would that be a good thing or a bad thing? I guess it depends on your point of view. Whitey White 14 over there in the chat would be like, yes. I think everybody else would be kind of like, no, God, no. Well, the attempted retconning of Hitler from history has been a major topic of conversation. But another topic of conversation that we've been having in this country, tariffs and central planning and Maybe abolishing the income tax. Is that privatization? People are so confused about what these terms really mean and what it is that we even really believe on the right. When I say the right, I'm talking about anybody who's for freedom, for free markets, right? If you're a socialist, to me, don't care what your beliefs are on ethnicity, you're on the left. We put all social. Remember when Candace Owens used to make that? She used to say, socialists are leftists. Nazis are socialists. Nazis are on the left. I don't know if she would say that anymore. Things have really changed on the right. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, now this Daryl Cooper character, all talking, and Ian Carroll talking about Adolf Hitler. Heil Hitler. I call myself AP, but I'm not the only one. As Yoda has said, there is another. Austin Padgett joining us live here on the Wake Up America show. He is the host of History 102. He's a libertarian writer, an ag tech entrepreneur, and an all-around good guy. Welcome to the show, Austin. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Austin. It's great to finally meet the other Austin. And it's fun to be able to write your own intro and compliment yourself in there. So
it certainly is.
That's always a good experience.
Absolutely, yes. And sorry for the long one, but when you're going to have a discussion about something as big a topic as Adolf Hitler and World War II, which God knows some of us are really just sick of, like nobody knows about any other conflict but World War II. But when somebody goes on Joe Rogan and says things like, Adolf Hitler it wasn't like he was making speeches in Berlin's public square and people were all like, yeah, let's go kill the Jews. He was only saying that in privately meetings. I kind of just have to ask, like, so what are you really trying to say with this? I mean, what's the message here?
Right. Well, I think my takeaway beyond, digging into the message is that I think Hitler did mention going after the Jews in the 20s, and I know he mentioned it in 39, and I saw a clip of him mentioning it, and it actually gave me really interesting context because it speaks to one of my other points, which it's not Jew hate that's the problem, it's Jew blame. It doesn't matter if someone hates someone, but they don't have any power over them. It doesn't matter. They're not going to do anything about it. But if you increasingly insert Jews and Israelis into narrative gaps as your kind of go-to explanation. For example, like Israel or AIPAC controls Congress. That's why we're not getting spending through. Then eventually, if we hyperinflate, everybody's going to be, and that becomes the narrative understanding of it, then everyone's going to be really, really mad at the Jews and resentful. And what Hitler said in the clip was, if the Jewish international financiers start a world war that destroys Europe, then we're going to make sure that that's the end of the Jews in Europe. They're going to go down with the ship if they do this to us. And when you put it in that perspective, from it's going to look to the people who are angry as vengeance, and to some it's going to look as justice. And you don't even have to hate the Jews any step along the way. You just have to blame them for your problems. And obviously, there were a lot of factors involved in the origin of World War II, and I would put that more into the politics between European powers, England's imperial ambitions and Germany's as well.
I can't disagree, so I won't, Austin. When I hear phrases, I've been around the block for quite some time now, about 20 years I've been doing this, and I'm very good at understanding how rhetoric works and how it can be easy to hornswoggle the public rhetorically by saying things like what this Daryl Cooper character just said, which is that it's not like Adolf Hitler went into Berlin's public squares and said, let's kill the Jews, and the American people did it. Okay, well, nobody said that he did that, right? And then he said it at party meetings. But then you're even sort of contradicting it, saying he was saying that in the 1920s and then once in 1939. But my real deeper question for you here is, Austin, is why is listen, I want to know the truth of history, no matter how painful or ugly it is. And there, of course, is a much more stark narrative other than just Hitler bad, Winston Churchill good. But why do you think there is such an intense desire by some on the right and even some on the left to reawaken and reinvigorate a discussion of why Adolf Hitler may have actually been not as bad as Winston Churchill, which strikes me as unsurprising considering the fact that I've been around libertarian politics for 20 years, and I've read all of the I've read all of the revisionist history literature. Like I've read the books about the hit pieces on Winston Churchill, for example, from the Mises guys, and I've read all the Tom DiLorenzo hit pieces on Alexander Hamilton and Abraham Lincoln, and I'm fully aware of the contrarian view and many libertarian views of history. But why do you think it seems to be so important for them to sort of revise and revitalize Adolf Hitler? Is it because there's a desire for a socialism that is not atheistic and but is still explicitly communistic, or in the discussion that we're about to have, socialistic?
Well, you kind of got to what I was going to say there, is that it's partly organic, because there's a lot of people who, we all grew up in the propagandized education system. In 2005 to 2015, there was a common talking point that, socialism is good, look at Scandinavia, and then the right would retort, well, Scandinavia is homogeneous, so that's the only reason it works there. Turns out, no, socialism doesn't actually work anywhere. Sweden's fairly similar to the US. They've had immigration issues since then, which kind of changes maybe you have to talk about Norway now. But there's a whole group of people who took that, and their conclusion was not, that we have to get rid of socialism, but we have to become homogeneous, and then socialism will work. So this is just a natural viewpoint based on the understanding of the world that's been built up in society over the last 100 years. And but like you say, there's a battle over defining the right. The media would define Ron Paul as far right, very libertarian, free market, kind of as a smear on our ideas. And then we kind of owned the right and made it cool. And now the people that they wanted to smear us with by associating us with that label also want a piece of that label. So everybody's competing for the right label. And like you said, I think, people who are repeating basically the public education system's narrative and the Marxist narrative that justifies all of our systems based on industrial age conditions. This is what they teach in French schools. It's the classic. It's the core of Marx's popularity, was digging into those industrial age conditions. So when you evoke these to justify our education institution, labor regulation, business regulation, then you're kind of pulling that blue-pilled view of history into the right and the red-pilled era.
It's strange because the Republican Party, then the majority coalition's the Republican Party, they used to talk a good game about free markets and free trade and limited government and conservatism, and even, nod and a wink at the libertarians every once in a while. Ron Paul would still be allowed in the debates, et cetera, et cetera. But it seems as if now the right has dispensed with even the rhetoric of free markets and has launched into a full-blown Marxist economic plan. Like I made the joke the other day that essentially, this is what happens when you let the Bernie Sanders wing of the Republican Party control economics. And, it's not just tariffs, right? It's about a lot of labor policy and views on labor when it comes to unions, for example. Trump wants the unions. He really wants the unions to like him. So he proposes things like, regulations that would not allow us to automate our ports in this country. We have we're so behind when it comes to automation and technology here in the United States, but we can't move forward because these unions are standing in the way. Suddenly it's unpopular on the right to say that the unions have become a hindrance to public life here in the United States. What's going on here?
Yeah, I would break that down into a couple angles. There's the narrative, and then there's the real what's happening. How do you put weight to different decisions? And there's a good example of the port automation being delayed. I actually think that when Trump's looking at that, he's making a kind of different calculation where there's not a big difference in terms of the investment if you start that project in 5 years. So it's basically a very minimal difference because the cost savings of automating are small and they'll be smaller in a few years. So I'm not, and I know it's going to go that way long term. So I'm not too worried about that relative to the overall approach, which is going to be drastically to reduce labor regulations and also free labor regulations up to be more the prerogative of the states. And then with tariffs, you see, it's the same thing with free trade zones, right? Where the neoliberal kind of movement in the 90s hurt us in terms of marketing with a lot of those labels because they talked about free trade zones as free trade when they're really kind of extensions of international regulatory and IP regimes, which in some cases is not the worst thing with some things. They're not some, free trade agreements get a little bit too much slack, but they would be less of a problem if we didn't destroy our ability to produce at home with our own regulatory environment.
Yeah, so like Bill Clinton,
the big gap is really made up.
Right, Bill Clinton, the neoliberals, the 1990s gave free trade a bad rap because the trade agreements that they had weren't really free trade. Of course, for those people who are a little bit more in the know about things like that and things like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, et cetera, is that typically what it involves is a limited reduction in trade barriers or tariffs or things that had existed before, whilst not being a perfect system, and perhaps even raising them in other areas in order to account for the fact that in order to get a deal done across the finish line, you never get 100% of what it is that you want. I mean, Otto von Bismarck says that politics is the art of the second best, the next best thing that you're actually capable of achieving, not the ideal, not the utopia, not everything that you want, but the next best thing that you're able to negotiate, which is what NAFTA and CAFTA and TAFTA, all these other free trade agreements ended up being to a large part, and were responsible for the tech boom, the Silicon Valley boom, and the United States becoming a technology leader in the United States. Cryptocurrency, the United States leading the way when it comes to cryptocurrency because of these technologies, because of the fact that we can get cheap chips from Taiwan and other places around the world. But in regards to our current predicament, AP, where the people like ourselves who believe in limited government nationally, internationally, like I'm not an anarchist, but I'm pretty damn close. If you could say, I call myself a libertarian nationalist, and those things may, in essence, have some conflict between the two of them, right? And I try and square that circle the best I can with an essay I wrote recently about libertarian nationalism as sort of the way Vivek Ramaswamy is describing it, right? But the tension that we face now is that the conversation on the right has turned to these cultural issues where freedom is not popular in ways that we could have never imagined. I mean, if you're a Christian libertarian, right, you're not going to approve of things like gay marriage or legalization of drugs or, heroin addicts or, people buying mushrooms in Oregon or Washington or what have you, right? But you're still going to defend people's liberty to do so whilst not agreeing with it. But the problem, of course, is that up until now, the people have been advancing these ideas, legalization of weed or legalizing of prostitution or what have you, have just like with Bill Clinton in the 90s, not, given it a bad name, right? Made it so that it's, the socialism of San Francisco it's not a libertarian utopia there where people are doing drugs and pooping in the streets and all these things. So we're sort of we're on our back foot here in the United States. One, because of the influence of the social liberalism, which, by the way, I am very social liberal. I'm not socially conservative, but I recognize a bad PR move when I see one. We're on our back foot there with these social issues culturally, but we're also on our back foot with these economic issues because we're fighting essentially the socialists on the right, a full-blown war of socialists on the right, whilst we're also facing a sort of an imperialistic sort of Catholic view of American society, which is sort of alien to the American tradition, considering that, Catholics couldn't get elected in the United States until the 1960s. But this cultural imperialism is very much anathema to libertarian ideals. We're sort of fighting a war on two fronts, social authoritarians and economic authoritarians. Would you say that that's about right?
Yeah, ironically, I would say most factions of libertarians have an issue in some way that prevents them from either focusing on the core issues or being able to make those core issues attractive. And for me, it's been Trump and Elon and Vivek who are putting the focus on getting rid of the regulatory bureaucracy. And this is what I said to President Trump himself was, good job on stopping World War III. The spending is largely an untouchable disaster, and good job on, flattening regulations. But unless we can really fundamentally change that progressive area regulatory structure, we're not going to fix anything. If we do, we can create 5+% growth. That's not even hard. We just don't realize the weight of the system that's been put upon us. Since that regulatory bureaucracy really exploded in the 60s, we went from having the top 4 companies in any given industry control on average 20% of the market share. Today it's 80%. That's an average. So basically pick any industry, the top 4 will control 80%. We live in a centrally planned bureaucratic dystopia. Central planning is not just high taxes and public spending. It's also the control of the economy. And they do that through these oligarchies in which the regulations prop up a limited number of partners, which makes it easier for the government to carry out their agenda through the economy. And this is basically it's hard to take out share of the spending that's going to save us from hyperinflation when half the country doesn't have savings and the economy is completely juiced up artificially. That's probably not going to be popular. It might not create, a good political mandate if you pull that Jenga block off first. So I'm really excited about what they're doing with education, getting rid of the Department of Education, because unless we free up the way in which kids can learn skills and then actually free them to apply those skills in the marketplace, we're not fixing anything. We're not going anywhere. We're sliding into disaster. And, a lot of libertarians view it in terms of the historical inevitable hyperinflation. There's not a lot of countries that reverse when you get to this point in history. And Elon has alluded to that. He says, we're trying to reprogram the matrix. It's an impossible game, so you have to reprogram it. And this is the quality of the people and the opportunity that they have is what is available to us to reprogram to change the equation.
We have to
it'd be like go ahead.
No, continue. Finish your thought.
Yeah, well, it'd be like if you lived in the 1600s and you had the chance to lower taxes 10%. Or get rid of the guild monopolies on trade, which is what kicked off the Industrial Revolution. And we can do that and have industrial era level growth on top of our existing technology base. We can fix our societal problems. We can give people, the means to take care of their families and thrive. And we can finally go into the future that's been robbed of us for so long. We can have drastic technological innovation instead of companies protecting their models because they don't want to invest in disrupting their own models because they have sunken costs in the infrastructure. And there's no pressure without competition to do that. That's why cars and planes and engines have barely changed in the last 50 years.
It's easy to see why so many on the right fall into the Marxist rhetoric. They fall into the socialist trap when it comes to these things, because there's always in the marketplace what is seen and what is unseen. And what is seen are the 1 job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs that are protected by labor policy. But what are unseen are the tens, maybe hundreds to thousands of jobs that are lost from the deadweight loss of the tax or the regulation, which creates the disequilibrium in the economy. For God's sakes, Austin, I was reading an article the other day by Walter Williams, and he was saying that it would have been cheaper instead of passing the tariffs. This was back when he was alive. Instead of passing the tariffs, he said it would have been less expensive for us to just, as taxpayers, just tax us to pay for the factory worker's job directly, and we'll spend less money and we'll distort the market much less with destroying all the pricing signals. Just pay the worker directly to protect the job. If they're taking our gerbs, just pay the taxpayer dollars to pay for their salary. But of course, that's not politically popular.
Yeah, and the thing that we insert into our narrative as the explanation for why we lost all this manufacturing is everybody thinks it's because of competition to cheap labor. I worked at a site selection company in Thailand where we helped European and Americans establish export markets in Asia and vice versa, or relocate. So, pretty sensitive topic. But what I found was, because we did a analysis of the top 20 factors that companies would look at to select where they went, and labor was always at the very bottom. It was like never in the top 15. Labor differences for manufacturing are almost identical between the US and China. In China, on average, it's 11% or 8% of your manufacturing revenue, and in the US, it is 11%. The trans-Pacific shipping alone is an additional 10%, 3 times the labor difference. What's making the difference is the regulation, the regulatory environment. China set up these special economic zones. And no, that doesn't mean that we have to pollute everything, because people get confused when they look at developing countries and they see a certain standard and they assume the difference in the standard between there and the US is regulation. But regulation is dependent on the level of technology and knowledge proliferated throughout the market. Regulations track development because they can only sit right in front of this possible standard, take credit for it, and then actually compromise innovation by locking up the market.
Good stuff. Good stuff, AP. I love it.
Yeah.
We're running out of time here. Everything from labor policy to Adolf Hitler. Austin Padgett can talk. Where can we find more about you and your work online, Austin?
Well, I do a show, History 102, with Rudyard Lynch, and we actually had we showed that you can disagree with Churchill and still prioritize free market economics, because we both have a different view on that, and that's all great. So that's kind of the coalition that I would like to see. And then you can follow me on Ludwig Never Mises, and Ludwig Never Mises on X. And then, yep.
There you go.
That's about it.
Ludwig Never Mises over on X. Austin, I got a feeling you and I are going to be having a lot more conversations like this. At least I hope we will throughout the rest of the year, because I really like the way that you look at things. I think you have a really interesting, unique take, whereas libertarianism is starting to march into a sort of NPC-like behavior of strange, cultish, the leader says it must be true, we all agree on the same things, it's very cultish. I see you sort of breaking the mold and being an independent thought, a free thinker amongst a group of free thinkers. I love to see it. Austin, have a great day. We'll follow you over at Ludwig Never Mises, and we'll reach out again really soon, have another conversation just like this. Have a good one.
All right, see you.
Seriously, though, we've heard a lot about extremism recently, a nastier, harsher atmosphere everywhere, more abuse and bother boy behavior, less friendliness and tolerance and respect for opponents. All right, but what we never hear about extremism is its advantages. Well, the biggest advantage of extremism is that it makes you feel good, because it provides you with enemies. Let me explain. The great thing about having enemies is that you can pretend that all the badness in the whole world is in your enemies, and all the goodness in the whole world is in you. Attractive, isn't it? So, if you have a lot of anger and resentment in you anyway, and you therefore enjoy abusing people, then you can pretend that you're only doing it because these enemies of yours are such very bad persons. And that if it wasn't for them, you'd actually be good-natured and courteous and rational all the time. So, if you want to feel good, become an extremist. Okay, now you have a choice. If you join the hard left, they'll give you their list of authorized enemies. Almost all kinds of authority, especially the police, the city, Americans, judges, multinational corporations, public schools, furriers, newspaper owners, fox hunters.
Furriers, was it furriers? Is that people who do? Oh no, it's people who do fur, not furries. Sorry, Kermode Barry. It's not. They didn't have in the 70s. They didn't have furries. Furriers, people who make fur.
Generals, class traitors, and of course, moderates. Or if you'd rather be an extremist on the hard right, no problem. Fine, you still get a lovely list of enemies. Only they're different. Noisy minority groups, unions, Russia. Weirdos, demonstrators, welfare sponges, meddlesome clergy, peaceniks, the BBC, strikers, social workers, communists, and of course, moderates. And upstart actors. Now, once you're armed with one of these super list of enemies. You can be as nasty as you like and yet feel your behaviors morally justified. So you can strut around abusing people and telling them you could eat them for breakfast and still think of yourself as a champion of the truth, a fighter for the greater good, and not the rather sad paranoid schizoid that you really are.
Well done, John Cleese. Good morning. Now, I could give it a shits. Ask yourself something. Were you going to see that clip anywhere else or hear that anywhere else today? Or were you going to hear it only on the Wake Up America show? Well, did you click the like button? Did you bless me with something?
Bless me with something.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, gosh.
Money-wise.
Please. Can you suck it?
What? Don't forget, as you exit through the gift shop and bless me with something money-wise. Drop a Rumble rant if you know that you had the best show you're going to watch today until tomorrow. The Wake Up America show is 5 days a week. It's a live stream. We have a lot of fun. And while we're live, we like to hang out. We like to joke. We like to make new friends. And we did make new friends today. We learned that Stingray is not a Mr. It's a Mrs. or perhaps a Miss. We learned that Sign of Jonah says that the United States is a Christian nation. And we will have a debate, provided that John Miltimore agrees. We will set it up for next Monday, Sign of Jonah. So I hope you're ready, because it would be at the same time. John Miltimore is at 8 a.m. next Monday. He has to agree to it, though. I can't force him, obviously. And we will have not a extremist fest of people just slinging pejoratives. We're going to learn something from the debate. And I will be as clear and clean a moderator as I will, but everybody will accuse me of being biased, because that's just how it works now. You extremists. Hey, I know that I started the show late, but I'm supposed to stop it at 9 a.m. I hope that you guys will join me again tomorrow. Make sure you click that follow button and exit through the Grift Shop at 4libertyshop.com. That's the number 4 libertyshop.com. Thanks to Whitey White 14. Thank you to Robbie Thurman, Dad Bod Baboon, I Given a Shit, Grizz Cheese, Quest Fanning, Decision Points, Torvarin, haven't seen you in a while, the lovely Cecilia, can't wait to see ya, Amy J. Ease, and Joni Rankin, all of my friends hanging out with us on the Wake Up America show. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one. Exit through the Grift Shop. Tired of spending your hard-earned money on woke corporations that don't share your pro-freedom values? Fed up with sipping liberal lattes and progressive cappuccinos? Introducing Founding Flavors from AP for Liberty Shop. Get your day started with Washington's Revolutionary Roast. As robust and principled as the man himself, this blend is the shot of energy heard round the world. Or maybe you want to taste the fervor of freedom with Adams's Patriotic Perk. It's as dynamic and balanced as the U.S. Constitution, sure to awaken your spirit of liberty. For the aficionados, we've got the Jeffersonian Java, a complex mix of flavors that speaks volumes about your refined tastes. And don't forget Betsy's Liberty Lullaby, our decaf option, crafted with the same care and dedication Betsy Ross put into our Star-Spangled Banner. This blend lets you enjoy the taste of freedom anytime without losing sleep. No woke beans here, folks. Just pure, patriotic, pro-freedom flavors brewed with love for liberty. So why compromise your principles for a cup of coffee? Stand up for your values, perk up your patriotism, and start your day the American way. Get your Founding Flavors at ap4libertyshop.com.